Hey folks, Quill here, and welcome to a quick tutorial on how to play Artemis Spaceship Bridge Simulator. If you don't know what it is, very quickly, this game, well, it's exactly what it says on the tin. It's a spaceship bridge simulator. Basically, it's like being the crew of the Starship Enterprise. One person is the helmsman, one person handles the weapons, one person is engineering, one person is communication, one person is science, and one person plays the captain. The game costs $40 for a license, but the way the license works is for the one copy, you can copy it onto the computer of everyone on your bridge team. So you basically get 6 copies of the game for the $40, which works out to about $7 a person. Now, you don't literally need your full crew of 6 people. You can have some people double up on some roles, so if you have slightly less than that, you're okay. And also, you can actually play this in a much larger multiplayer setting with multiple player ships. And you can play it co-op-y or PvP-ish or whatever. I think the most I ever got in a game with, I think we had 5 different ships, and each of them were crewed by 5 or 6 people. So a really massive game. Generally speaking, you're fighting up against AI enemy ships that are attacking your space stations, that sort of thing. So without further ado, let's get started on how you actually play this game. So once you've downloaded and you've got it installed, you'll have your Play Artemis thing here. And I'm going to start it up. It's going to ask you for what resolution you want to start in. And I like starting it in windowed mode and slightly smaller than the actual resolution on my screen when I'm starting the game. Because here's a gotcha. One person has to be the server to host the game. So, and historically I've been the one that's done that, so I'm going to give you that playthrough there. So I'm going to start one session up windowed like this. Takes a second just to launch. There it is. I'm just going to try to move the window over here. And so this is one window there. So I'm going to launch this instance of the game as the server. And the server doesn't do anything, although it kind of acts like the main screen viewer. It's quite nice to just sort of watch the action on there. Now, I won't be able to truly play the game because I'm going to be playing this solo, but we'll go through the different stations that you can play as. So, start server. And, ooh, I did get a pop-up to allow it through my firewall, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. You might want to just turn off the firewall, and you will have to be aware of various, like, sort of port forwarding things on your actual router if you want people to be able to connect to your computer, because as you can see here, it says this machine's address is this, and it works really good if all of you are on the same network. If you're on a LAN, for example, all in the same building, it works beautifully perfectly. If not, well, then it gets to be a little bit more complicated because you have to know your public IP address, and that's a little beyond the scope of this video. Maybe I'll do a follow-up video talking about what all this means, but I just want to put out a gotcha there. Anyway, so we're going to finish setting up the game. The solo and co-op game are basically the same, except the co-op allows you to have multiple ships, and in the PvP game, you're mostly going to be dueling. I'm going to go ahead and set up a solo game here, just for the example. There's a difficulty level that you can assign, and of course, like all good difficulty levels, it does go all the way up to 11. I'm just going to leave it on 1 now, so that mostly I can just float around in space and not get attacked too much. There are a few different configurations about the combat. Siege enemies will spawn, so you're going to have a handful of star bases in the center of the kind of the galactic quadrant that you're in. And on Siege, the enemy is going to spawn sort of all around from all directions. You can also have them spawn on a single front or a double front. I find Siege to be quite fun, actually. The single front, especially on a higher difficulty, can really prove to be interesting. You know where they're going to come from. On the other hand, they'll also be more concentrated. So you can experiment with different things. You can set a time limit for your mission. Usually we just leave it at 0-0. And then the game ends when we've destroyed all of the enemies. The sector, barren, interesting, or very interesting, denotes how many extra space objects there will be in the in the sort of galactic sector that you're in. With barren, you're basically just going to have the star bases and the enemy ships and whatever player ships might be there. As you get to interesting and very interesting, there will be things like asteroid fields, minefields, black holes, space aliens. Also, there will be friendly NPC transport ships that can that need to be protected and can also give you missions. They will say, oh, if you go to a star base, this is where the comm station comes in. You can hail these people and see if they need anything from you. They'll say, yeah, go to star base DS3, pick up the the thingy-majig, bring it to me, and then what I will do is I will upgrade your shields, for example. So, the very first time, if you're just trying to learn the controls, do play on Baron, but going up to at least interesting is highly recommended. Very interesting is really crowded, so you need to have a pretty competent pilot and good navigation by your captain to really make that work out very well. So I'm going to go ahead and just leave it on Baron for this example again. You can also customize things a little bit. The network update speed depending on your latency, you might want to tweak this up or down, depending on how laggy your connection is. Experiment with different things to see what goes. You can change your sensor range. The default is to have it unlimited, but if you want to have it harder thing, you'll still, I believe, you'll still see blips on your screen. You'll know that there's something somewhere, even if they're beyond your range, but you won't be able to scan them, is I believe the way it works. But don't take me 100% there. You can also make the enemy stronger or weaker. So the difficulty setting mostly deals with how many enemy ships spawn and how powerful are they. Are they going to be small scout ships, or are they going to be huge battle cruisers? But you can also make them more powerful without causing them to spawn more, for example, and also tweak the player's strength for, different game balance experiments, especially if you're having a hard time at first. Like, maybe you want lots of enemy ships to keep it interesting, but you want to make it a little bit easier, so you're gonna bring them down. Enemies already move slower than you do, so that's not quite as important, but you might want to bring down their shields and weapon power, for example, and that might help. So let me go and put it back to 1 for my example, and that's it. So when you start the game will actually launch. At this point, we're ready to connect with the client. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop out on the desktop. And again, the ideal environment is you do this in, imagine you've got a classroom at school with a bunch of computers, and you have one hooked up to a projector. This is the one you're going to hook up to the projector. I think this turns into main screen. I might be lying to you. We're going to find out in a second. And then everyone else sits at their own computer and then connect to this machine using this IP address, and then things become awesome. So where did I put my icon, actually? I think I sort of displaced it over here. There we go. So in this case, because I happen to be running everything on my computer, I'm going to start a second instance of the game. There we go. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to connect. I'm going to start a client session, and I'm going to connect to myself. Now, I can do that by putting in my IP address, which is the .21. So I go 192.168.2.21, and I should be able to connect to the server. There we go. So I've done that, and if I swing this back over this way, you can pay attention here. It currently still says 0 for the number of people connected, but that's because I haven't actually sat down at a station yet. So, oh, there we go. There's the main screen command. You can see it turns to 1. So I'm telling the computer, this computer here that I'm connecting to right now is going to be the main screen. You can see actually we can have up to 8 different ships. We can rename our ships to whatever we want. The Quill-tastic, for example. There are 2 types of drives. There's warp drive and jump drive. We'll talk about that a little bit inside the game. We'll leave it on the default of warp drive, and then there's a few different ships, like cruiser, scout. Light cruiser is your default, fast, maneuverable, and a decent array of weapons. Scout is very lightly armored, or it has very few weapons, actually, and far fewer torpedo bays, if I recall correctly, but moves around quite quickly and it does its energy pretty effectively. Battleship, much stronger. Missile cruiser, not much in the way of beams, but huge amounts of missiles. Dreadnought, even stronger than the others. I think Dreadnought is the most powerful ship class, although it turns slow and uses a lot of energy. There's definite potential if you've got a large group of players that you might want to have people specialize. I'm going to leave it on Light Cruiser because it is the default of the game, and it's pretty good. So, at this point, I can hit ready to play, and on the server side, what I can just do is, this is where you start the game. So again, the one person who's the server, that's where you're going to go and click Start Game. And so the server screen gives you this cool sort of cinematic type of view. And then over on my player side, this, remember, I'm on the main screen view, and this is what the main screen will show. There's nothing else you can do on the main screen. You just normally put this on the projector. So that's not very interesting. So let me go ahead and hit Options. And, well, I thought I could change screens. Console choice screen. There we go. So the game is still going, but I'm going to change the console choice. In fact, I'm going to sit myself at every single station that I can currently sit at, just so that we can give you an example of everything. Oh, there's actually not enough room for me to showcase everything. So you know what, let me go and turn off, you know what, we'll just grab the first 4, and then we'll do the next 4 after that. So, I am now at the Helm Station. So you can tell right away my view is quite different. In fact, let me switch over to, there we are, to the full game view. So this is what you see if you were seated at the helm. Your job is to drive the ship. You also have these buttons here. These control where the main screen is. So if the captain, by default, you're looking out through the front of your screen, so it's fine, but maybe the captain wants to see behind you. So the captain will say, show me the rear view, and it's your job as the navigator, as the helm, to click rear view, which, oh, does affect our other screen. You know what, give me a sec. Let me bring up the second game. Is this the second game? No, that's the same one as before. Turn that off. There we go. Let me just arrange the view so we can see both at the same time in the recording. So what you see in the bottom right corner here, this is what the main screen is going to be showing. So you can quite clearly see that the helm has the ability to change that. So it looks like the server view is the main screen, as well as you can sit yourself at the main screen if you want to. And the cam button, and tactical view, long range scanner view, information screen. That tells you things about your ship. So those are all, let me bring it up bigger so we can see those again. This will seem familiar. When we get to the engineering screen, this will be very similar to that. The long range scanner screen, when we get to the science screen, will seem very familiar. And then the tactical view, well, it's a tactical view. So we're gonna put it back on the front screen, and let me shrink that main screen again down to here. So, all right, so the piloting view. As the helm, you can control things with the arrow keys to go left and right. You can see at the bottom here, this sort of like how I'm turning. If I go all the way to the left, and I've let go of the keyboard at this point, I'm continuing to turn to the left. And then I can, you know, just tweak it, center it again. So now I will pause that, and that's fine. This number here is your heading. You can see the compass. 0 is straight north, 180 would be straight south, 90 to the east, and 270 to the west. Obviously, cardinal directions don't really make sense in space, but it is more or less going to be a 2D-ish map, just because that's convenient. You can go up and down. This control here allows you to climb or dive a little bit, but mostly you really do just play the game on a 2D plane because we just have an easier time playing that. It turns out that full three-dimensional controls in space is a little complicated to do. Your controls over here are your speed, which you can control by going with the up and down arrow. So this one on the right is your impulse speed. This is your normal movement speed. Am I in the front view? Yeah. Oh, there, and I can toggle the camera. There we go. Okay. So this is normal impulse speed. You can see this is a star station, Deep Space 1 over here. So I'm slowly going past it. The second lever here, this is your warp speed. So I can bring it up. There, I've just hit warp speed 1. I'm going much, much faster. Warp speed 2, even faster. Let me turn around here. Warp speed 3, and there's also a 4. But each one of those uses more and more energy. You can see over here there's an energy meter. If I'm just buzzing around at impulse speed, my energy pretty static, especially right now. My shields are down, and yeah, I can go full impulse, and I probably won't run out of gas. In fact, it looks like I'm generating a slight amount of power. Yeah, just went up to 960. And at warp 1, it will drain, but very slowly. At warp 4, it will drain incredibly fast, and more than 4 times. Like, your warp speed 4 might be 4 times the speed of warp speed 1, but it uses hugely more energy. So unless you absolutely must get somewhere in a hurry, usually warp 1 or warp 2 is what you're going to want to do to try to conserve power. If you do run out of energy, you've got a few options, and one of them is to actually dock at a starbase. So let me get a little closer to the starbase over here, and I will request dock. And if we look at the big screen over here, you can see we've actually been captured in a tractor beam. And actually, even on the helm, I can switch to the vision. And I get hooked up to the tractor beam. And what that will do is fill up my energy, repair some of the damage, and also refill my missiles, which we're going to talk about more when we're in weapon mode. If you are the helmsman, the way to leave the dock is to simply apply a little bit of gas, and you will leave the starbase. You can collide with things, so, you know, just try not to do anything too crazy. And that's the big thing. As the helmsman, what you're waiting for is your captain to tell you where to go, because you don't know where to go. I mean, you can switch to the long-range scanner screen, sort of. Like, here's actually an enemy. It hasn't been scanned yet, and there's going to be another one, and another over there, and there. But your captain actually has great tools to determine what your heading should be. He'll say, oh, set course for 163, so in like ballpark, okay, 163 is over here, and, you know, engage at warp 2. All right, so you will do that, and you will just do that because he's getting the view, he or she is getting the view that will allow him to plan strategically, and then you just follow those orders. And then when you get in combat, this red area here, for example, this is the firing arc for your beams. You actually got 2 arcs. One is this slice here, and one is this slice here. If you're on a different ship, you'll have a different firing arc. And your enemy will also have a firing arc. So what you're going to often try to do is try to position yourself that you're outside of their firing arc by staying behind them, but also keeping your beams trained on them. The missiles are a little bit different how they fire, and we can examine that maybe a little bit later. It's going to be actually really tricky for me to actually engage in combat here in the single player mode. You really do want multiple people so that you can keep different commands, because Helm, I find, is actually one of my favorite roles to play, but it's fairly demanding. You do have the ability to reverse. You can, as Helm, toggle the shields. So shields up, shields down. Although a few other roles, I know that weapons does. I think engineering may as well. Nope, I'm wrong, but weapons does. There you go. So what you want to do is you want to make sure that your weapon and helmsman, that they're not doubling up on the shield duty, because the worst thing is if you go into combat and they both hit the button, one person brings them up and then the other person clicks and brings them down, and you're going into battle without any shields at all. That is a bad thing. Try not to do that. You can change your zoom here on the tactical screen. Zoom 1 is all the way in, and zoom 4 is as far out as possible. So depending on what you're looking to do. Often I like to zoom out a little bit. In this view, you will not be able to see the enemy until they get into your short range scanners, which maybe what this white circle is, that might be missile range. Off the top of my head, I'm not actually recalling. But you will, to a certain extent, be going in blind, and then they will suddenly show up on this view, and then you'll deal with them. And I think that's what I want to talk about for Helm. So let's go over to the weapon screen. Actually, you know what? I should do some science first. Let me skip ahead to science at this point. So in the science view, you've got a great sort of plotting map here that you can play with. You can zoom in and out easily with the middle mouse button. You can scroll the view by clicking and dragging. This is the zoom level over on the side. And all your enemies even have identifier tags and directions, which is great because you did not have that before. Now I can click on an enemy, and I don't know what this is. In fact, there's two of them over here is what it looks like. It's telling me unknown. Oh, maybe not. Maybe there's just the one. So I can hit scan, and so I know the direction. They're at 6 to me, cardinally, I think. Yeah, so 6, almost straight north. You can see the little beam around them, which scans them. Also the range, and now I know this is a Corellian cruiser, very common. Yeah, most common vessel in the known universe. And it has a forward and rear shield strength of 40 each, and I think that's all the information that I've got at this point on there. So let's scan another one, see how it goes. So again, scan, you get the little meter, and I can flip over. I can click on other things while that scan is happening. Now, I can't start a second scan. If I click over here, it's gonna start a scan here, and it stopped this one. I don't remember if it keeps the progress or not. We're gonna go and give that a try in just one moment. So we got another scan complete. I'm gonna scan there. Yeah, it does restart the scan. So generally speaking, you wanna let the scans finish. But yeah, I can click around. So what was that one? Corellian Dreadnought, and it's not alone. Okay, that is definitely a lot scarier. It's got 3 times the shield strength, and it's got some more damage as well. It's got 2 rapid fire beams and 1 heavy beam, whereas the cruiser here is just 2 standard beams, for example. This is a Dreadnought. Oh, another Dreadnought, but that one's alone. So that's your role as science, is to scan all the things at this point. I think there's a way to find out something about the shields, and I haven't played this role too much, so off the top of my head, I'm not seeing it, but we're going to come back to that. So, Helm. Let's talk about weapons now. All right, so weapons, you've got, see these beams, hang on. I'm missing something, and I don't want to move forward while that's the case. Let me grab the captain's console and see if that gives me something that I'm missing here. Do we have to get in close before we find out what their armor type is? I may have to, like, semi-suicide myself here. Let me get the shields up. So we're going to go... No, actually, we're going to go to the cruiser over here. So we're at 16. So we got to set course for 16, and then bring the speed up. And then recheck our heading. Direction is 20. And we're going to try to avoid running into them. So again, the Helm side, I have no idea necessarily what I'm heading to at this point, and that's okay. This game is all about coordinating between multiple people. All right, let me drop out of warp. How do I find out their shield frequency? There we go. There we go. Now we got a shield frequency. So this is the strength of all their shields. So they're weakest on D. So we can head over to the weapon screen. We set our beams to D. And now they're auto-firing by default. So as long as I'm within range here, they will fire. So let me go and change the helm over here. I'm going to turn into them, so that should bring us into range. And in fact, if I go to the visual screen at this point, we should watch the hits unload, because we should enter fire range in just a second here. Right? Yes. There we go. I've properly clicked on them. There you go. So now the beams are going. They're hitting the rear shield, which again, I can spot those by watching things in the science. Their rear shield is completely gone, so I'm passing that information to the captain as much as possible. I have to double check. I may be getting wrong about the shield strength, but I'm pretty sure D is their weakest, and that's what I should be shooting. I'm pretty sure I'm getting that right. But beams are fine, but they're not quite as interesting as missiles. So what we're going to do is we have 2 missile tubes. I'm going to select the homing missile, most common missile, and I'm going to load one to tube 1. And in tube 2, I'm going to load a nuke, which we will fire later. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to Helm. I'm actually going to warp for a second, give us a little bit of space. Then, let's do a little bit more. Why not? Okay. Yeah, okay, you can see that this circle is the short-range scanner range here. So I've lost track of them on the Helm, and it probably means... Well, I still get this this rating here, but I'm pretty sure that's when you get that information. So we're going to come about on the weapon screen here. And we're going to try to lock them. Okay, so we've got this guy locked. We're going to now fire a homing missile and go to the visual screen. We can actually see the homing missile streak out towards them. And these things do huge amounts of damage. But you have a limited amount of them. And they also take time to reload. Let's see if they hit. The missiles can be shot down if you're very quick. Boom. All right, so we hit them. Hopefully we did a good amount of damage to them. Yeah, their shields were damaged, but they weren't killed. So let's hit them with a nuke this time. Because when in doubt, nuke things. And then take the helm, turn away. Oh, then we'll lose the screen. Never mind, turn back. Okay, well, we actually missed the hit, but it definitely exploded the ship right away. Your nukes are extraordinarily powerful, and it's very hard for any ship to hold up against a nuke. It's possible the Dreadnought at full shield strength, I believe, can soak the hit, but that's about it. So at weapon, now both our tubes are empty, so we're going to go ahead and we'll reload maybe a couple of homing missiles there. So you do have a limited supply. You can refill if you dock to the starbase, but first you have to ask them to build you some stuff. So I'm actually going to go and I'm going to take the helm off and the weapons off at this point. I'm going to grab comms. Observer and Game Master, we're just going to ignore them. They don't really do much at this point. They're just to watch. And the Game Master, we're going to save that to another point. All right, so if I go to the comms now, this is the communication screen. First of all, you've got the red alert button, which is very good. Everyone likes red alert, right? So it doesn't do anything. It just sounds the klaxon. So you can communicate with other player ships, with enemies. So I can hail the one of the dreadnoughts, and I can insult them. And you can actually ask people to surrender, like this. And if they've taken some damage, or if they've taken a lot of losses, they may actually surrender. As comms, you can actually take enemies out of the game by simply asking them to stand down. But we can also communicate with the station. So we'll talk to DS1. We're going to ask DS1 to build some nukes for us. Okay, DS1 is building nukes. And we'll ask DS2 to build some homing missiles for us. There we go. So they're going to start producing that. There we go. DS4 has just let us know that they've created a nuke. They have 5 in stock. And as the comm officer, my job would be to communicate that to the captain and say, Captain, if we go to DS4, we didn't even ask them to do anything. DS4 was just automatically set to creating nukes from the start. So we can let them know, hey, we just fired a nuke. If you go to DS4, you can pick up another one. So we will probably do that. We can always report status. This is all the stuff that they currently have waiting there, which is great. Building a nuke, it'll be done in 10 minutes. Their shields are great. What else can we ask? Stand by for docking, and you have to build things. And then if there were other ships, if there were those transport ships in the game, it's not here because we did the Barren Galaxy, but here we could ask if anyone's got any missions for us, that sort of stuff. So that is basically the captain's interface. Mostly as a captain, you could click around here to get a look at things, right? Like this, and you can get your direction and the range to tell your helmsperson how to get places. And you make your strategic choices. You're like, okay, you know what, this guy, actually this is the fleet that's going to be dangerous if it gets in range of the star bases, because you lose if you lose all your star bases. So you've got to make sure to protect them. Actually, C61 is getting close. I'm going to say, hey, science, scan C61 for me. Aye, Captain. We're going to find out what they are, and then if they're not like a scout or something like that, then we will probably have to go and destroy them to protect DS1, for example. So we're going to find out what this is. It's Krellian battleship. That's pretty dangerous. We're going to have to, take care of that at some point. So the last thing we've got left is engineering. Engineering is actually a really fun and interesting role. I'm actually going to go and disable that window there so we can see everything. So as engineering, there's a few things. First of all, one of your major jobs is to keep an eye on energy, because you can have a tremendous impact on the amount of energy we have. Oh, the other thing we have actually is something we can do in weapons, I think. Let me bring weapons back up, because we're going to want to talk about that. I'll just disable the rest. Yes, okay. So from the weapon screen, one more thing I want to mention here. Your energy. If you run out of energy, you're going to be in bad shape. If you have torpedoes, if you have torpedoes available, then you can convert a torpedo to energy. So we're going to do that. It's going to eat one of my homing torpedoes. So I've got 7 right now. If I hit this, it'll go down to 6, but it'll give me energy. It gives me 100 energy per. It's obviously not an ideal thing, but it can really save your bacon in case of emergency. You can also convert energy into a torpedo. It costs 150 to create 1 homing torpedo. All right, so engineering. This is your ship readout. You can see if you've taken damage anywhere. And I suppose if I want to demonstrate the damage, what I could do is fly into an enemy ship without my shields on, then we'd really see it. These are different subsystems. These are, for example, your beams, front shield, that's important, torpedo launcher, more shield nodes, more beams, more shields, sensors, torpedoes, maneuvering thrusters, so you can steer, impulse engine for your non-warp speed, and then there's your rear shields, and then the warp engines here, for example, right? So a bunch of systems. It will vary somewhat based on what ship you've got. And you've also got some diamonds here that represent your damage control team. So if you take damage somewhere, they will automatically, by default they're on autonomous, they will automatically run to the damage system and try to repair them. You can also put it on autonomous, and then you can actually direct your damage control team. So you click, see, I click on them to select, and then I click somewhere to send them somewhere, and they will go and move in that direction. But autonomous, I think, for the damage control team is generally good enough. Most of what you're doing in engineering is messing around with redirecting power, which to me is always a classic Star Trek thing, right? Redirect power to forward shield, redirect all power to beams, you know, all these different things. So that's what these sliders are. Right now, all the systems are currently operating at 100% power. So let's say we need to get a burst of speed. We need to quickly get to a starbase that's under attack. So we want to boost some energy to the warps. So we can do that. We can just increase it to, say, 200% warp energy. So one, that will, well, we're not warping right now, so that's actually not going to affect that too much. Let me go and reset it by clicking on the 1 over here. Let me go at impulse. So we're currently at impulse speed. So if I do that, and you'll be able to see the energy will start to drop pretty noticeably. Also, this thing starts to go up. What is this thing? Well, let's find out what happens when it maxes out. This is actually the heat on the system. Because we're overcharging the system's building heat. Now we've just damaged one of our impulse nodes. If we keep doing this, it will happen again. Our impulse is only 83% effective, now 66% effective. Okay, hold on. In fact, we actually caused things to explode so hard, we lost one of our damage control teams over here to a fire, which is bad because now they repair things slower. Now they've reached one of these impulse nodes, they're going to repair them. The other damage control team over here is automatically going to the second impulse node to get things repaired. All right, so 2 things. 1, redirecting more power somewhere eats a lot of energy. And again, I think it's sort of it's almost an exponential thing. You know, going from 100 to 125 eats up a certain amount, but then going up another 25% eats up more and more and more. And the same thing is true for the heat. How do you deal with the heat? Well, these things on the side, this is extra coolant. So what you can do is you can click, so we can redirect coolant over here. By default, you start with 8 units worth of coolant. Yeah, 8 units worth of coolant. So I've applied all of it to impulse, but I could also just apply half of it over here. And then these yellow nodes mean where you can put more coolant. I can't go and put 8 over here, but I can put 4 into the warp to help there. So, you know, you might want to put, all right, we'll put 4 in impulse, 2 in the warp, and then we're entering combat, so we're going to need a little bit more maneuverability so we can turn faster. So I'll up maneuverability, and then I'll put a little bit of coolant in there just to keep an eye on it. And so that's what your role is in engineering. You're trying to adapt to whatever's happening, and you're going to try to redirect power the right way. If you're into combat, you know what? Kill the warp engines. You don't need warp in combat at all. So let's kill that completely, and then we're going to be able to save a little bit of energy, and maybe that means we can apply a little bit more to maneuvering so we can turn around a little bit faster, and then also give it more coolant. Some of the missions that you can do in the universe with more of the little transport ships, some of them will give you more coolant, which makes it a lot easier to fulfill these different roles in engineering. One of the really cool things that you can do, these numbers here are presets. So if I click on 1, it'll reset everything to the default. And I like to keep 1 as the default. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to create a combat configuration, which means I will drop the warp speed all the way down to 0. I will boost impulse, boost maneuverability, and you know what I'll do is I'll also boost the front and rear shields. Okay, this is like standard combat maneuverability, and then we're gonna put a little bit of coolant everywhere. Let me take a couple of those off. We'll do that. Now I'm gonna click store and then store it into 2. So now 1, everything is balanced. 2, I've got my combat maneuverability set up, and I think I can hit the hotkeys as well. 1, 2, 1, 2, which is great. Now let's say I want an aggressive one. Maybe we're doing like a headlong run to an enemy. We're not maneuvering, we're not trying to get into position. What we're trying to do is aim straight down their throat and just laser them as much as possible. So now my combat setup is going to be, okay, we'll redirect 200% power to shields and put in lots of coolant, and then we'll also redirect some extra power to the primary beam so that the beam will fire more frequently or more damaging. I don't remember which is which. For the torpedoes, the torpedo thing affects their reload speed, for example. You'll really notice a difference. You can see already here we're still generating some heat there. But you know what? We're going to store this. 3 is our sort of kamikaze forward run. We'll go back to 1. In fact, in the 1 setup, I will go ahead and put 1 unit of cooling in every category, so it will sort of passively cool anything that might have any residual heat. That sounds like a good idea for 1. 2 is my combat maneuver. 3 is my combat suicide run. 1 is my normal cruise speed. All right, I dig it. And you can keep going like that. You can have your 4 can just be like super warp speed because you're getting in a hurry. You customize it whatever way you want. You've got that flexibility. It's also your job, in my opinion, it is the engineering's job to keep the captain up to date on energy levels. The weapons officer gets to see it all the time. The helm sees it all the time as well. But to me, it's engineering's job to deal with that. Just like, in my opinion, it's weapons' job to put the shields up and down, for example. And Comm's job to ring the red alert. And wait, that is it for all the major stations. Again, the way you want to win the game is you want to destroy all the enemy by default, like the way I play it. Destroying all the enemies will end the game. Losing all the star bases will end the game. I believe in Artemis 1, if you lost your ship, it was game over. But I believe in Artemis 2, it's only game over when you lose all the star bases, which is good in a multiplayer setting when you've got multiple ships, because the worst thing in there was to have your ship explode in the first minute, because, you know, stuff happens. And then the game still goes on for 10 or 15 minutes, and you just sit there and watch everyone else have fun. So now I think you will respawn as long as you still have star bases, although dying still sucks. So anyway, that is it for this tutorial for Artemis. I hope you enjoy it, and it's certainly a very fun game, and you should check it out. See you next time, folks. Bye-bye.